The blizzard howled like a vengeful spirit, clawing at the icy road where Emma's sleek Mercedes sputtered and died. Stranded in the dead of night, her designer coat offered no warmth against the biting cold. Headlights long faded, her phone battery blinked its final warning. "Someone, anyone," she whispered, voice trembling as snow buried her footprints. Would she freeze out here, alone? Then a faint glow flickered in the distance, a rundown farmhouse. Heart pounding, she stumbled toward it, unsure if salvation or something darker awaited. Will this stranger be her savior? Watch to find out and share this gripping tale with your friends. Emma Langley stood at the pinnacle of her world, a titan in a glass tower. At 38, she was the youngest CEO of Lumora Enterprises, a tech empire that powered half the world's smartphones. Her penthouse office in Manhattan gleamed with polished chrome and floor-to-ceiling windows that framed a city that never slept. To the world, she was unstoppable. Her name graced Forbes covers, her sharp suits commanded boardrooms, and her speeches drew standing ovations. But late at night, when the city's lights blurred into a distant hum, Emma would pause by those windows, her reflection staring back like a stranger. The weight of her success felt hollow, a gilded cage of her own making. No one saw the way her fingers lingered on the photo tucked in her desk drawer, a faded picture of her late mother smiling under a willow tree, the only person who'd ever truly known her. Emma had climbed mountains, but the loneliness at the top was a quiet ache she couldn't outrun. Tonight, racing to a crucial investors' meeting upstate, her car had betrayed her, stranding her in a frozen nowhere. She was a woman who controlled everything except this moment. Miles away in a frost-kissed valley, Thomas Harlan knelt in the soft glow of a lantern, mending a fence under the watchful eyes of his old collie, Rusty. At 42, Thomas was a man carved by the land. His hands, calloused and scarred, knew the rhythm of the seasons, planting, harvesting, surviving. His farmhouse, weathered and creaking, stood as the last remnant of his family's legacy, a small patch of earth his parents had poured their hearts into before illness took them both. The townsfolk called him the quiet farmer, a man of few words but steady presence. Each morning he rose before dawn, feeding his chickens, tending his modest crops, and sharing his breakfast with Rusty, who'd curl up by the hearth. His life was simple, but not empty. He found joy in small things, a calf's first steps, the crunch of snow underfoot, the way the stars seemed to whisper secrets on clear nights. Yet there were moments when the silence of his home pressed too heavily. No laughter filled the rooms, no voices echoed in the halls. Thomas didn't speak of it, but his heart carried a quiet longing for connection, for someone to share the warmth of his world. Emma's life was a whirlwind of deadlines and deals, her days mapped out in precise increments. She thrived on control, her mind always 3 steps ahead. But beneath the polished exterior, she wrestled with doubts. Had she traded too much for success? Her friends were colleagues, her relationships fleeting. The investors' meeting tonight was her chance to secure a deal that could redefine her legacy, but now, stranded in the snow, her empire felt useless. She clutched her coat tighter, her breath clouding in the frigid air, wondering if anyone would stop for a woman like her, someone who seemed to have it all. Thomas, meanwhile, had learned to live with less. His farm barely broke even, his truck groaned with every mile, and the world beyond his valley seemed to move on without him. But he had a quiet strength, a kindness that showed in the way he nursed an injured sparrow back to flight or left extra firewood for his elderly neighbor. He didn't dream of wealth or fame, only of a life where the heart wasn't so solitary. As he hammered the last nail into the fence, Rusty's ears perked up, catching a faint sound in the distance, a desperate knock carried on the wind. Their worlds, so different, were about to collide. Emma, a woman who'd conquered boardrooms but not her own heart, and Thomas, a man who'd weathered loss but never stopped giving, stood on the edge of a moment neither could predict. What would happen when a millionaire's polished desperation met a farmer's quiet resilience? Keep watching to see how their story unfolds. And don't forget to subscribe and share this journey with your friends. The wind screamed across the desolate road, flinging snow into Emma's face like shards of glass. Her Mercedes, now a lifeless hulk, sat uselessly in the drifts, its engine silent. Her high heels sank into the snow as she stumbled forward, clutching her thin coat, the cold biting through her resolve. Her phone was dead, the investors' meeting a distant dream. Panic clawed at her chest. Nobody knew she was here, miles from the nearest town. The faint glow of a farmhouse flickered ahead, her only hope. Shivering, she staggered to the door, her knuckles raw as she pounded against the weathered wood. "Please, someone," she called, voice cracking. Would anyone answer, or was she truly alone? Inside, Thomas Harlan stirred from his chair by the fire, Rusty's low growl pulling him from his thoughts. The knock was faint, almost lost in the storm's roar, but it carried a desperation that made his heart lurch. He hesitated. Strangers didn't come this far out, especially not in a blizzard. His farm was a sanctuary, his solitude hard-won, but the urgency in that voice tugged at something deep within. He grabbed his lantern, the glow casting shadows on the peeling wallpaper, and opened the door a crack. A woman stood there, her face pale, lips trembling, eyes wide with fear. Her designer coat was dusted with snow, her posture that of someone unaccustomed to asking for help. "My car, it broke down," she stammered. "I'm freezing, please." Thomas's first instinct was to close the door. He didn't know her, didn't trust the world beyond his valley, but Rusty whined softly, nudging his leg, and the sight of her shaking hands softened his resolve. "Come in," he said gruffly, stepping aside. Emma stumbled over the threshold, the warmth of the fire hitting her like a wave. The house was sparse, worn furniture, a single lamp, the faint smell of wood smoke and coffee, but it felt alive, unlike the sterile luxury of her penthouse. She sank into a chair, her breath uneven, as Thomas set a kettle on the stove. "You're lucky you found this place," he said, not meeting her eyes. "Storm's only getting worse." Emma nodded, too cold to speak, her mind racing. She wasn't used to relying on strangers. In her world, people wanted something, her money, her influence. But this man, with his weathered jacket and quiet movements, seemed to want nothing. She glanced around, noticing a photo on the mantel, a couple, maybe his parents, smiling in a field. It stirred a pang in her chest, a memory of her mother's laughter under that willow tree. "Thank you," she managed, her voice small. Thomas just nodded, handing her a chipped mug of tea, the steam curling between them like a fragile truce. Outside, the storm raged, sealing them in this moment. Emma's fingers wrapped around the mug, its warmth grounding her. She wasn't sure what unnerved her more, the fact that she was stranded or the way this stranger's quiet kindness made her feel seen. Thomas, meanwhile, watched her from the corner of his eye, wondering why a woman like her, polished, clearly wealthy, was alone on a night like this. Rusty curled up at her feet, a silent vote of trust, and Thomas felt a flicker of something he hadn't in years. Curiosity, maybe hope. "You got a name?" he asked, breaking the silence. "Emma," she said, hesitating. Emma Langley. The name felt too big for this small room, but Thomas didn't react, just nodded. "Thomas Harlan. You're stuck here till the storm passes. Roads won't clear till morning." Emma's heart sank. She'd miss her meeting, maybe her one shot at that deal. But as she looked at Thomas, his steady hands stoking the fire, she felt an odd calm. This wasn't her world. but something about it felt right. The fire crackled in Thomas's small living room, casting a warm glow across the worn floorboards. Emma sat huddled in an old armchair, the mug of tea still cradled in her hands, its heat a lifeline against the storm raging outside. Her designer coat hung by the door, dripping snow onto the floor, a stark contrast to the simplicity of the room. Thomas leaned against the kitchen counter, his eyes occasionally flicking to her, unsure of this stranger who'd stumbled into his world. Rusty, the collie, lay at Emma's feet, his soft snores a quiet rhythm beneath the wind's howl. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it carried weight, like the air before a confession. Emma's gaze drifted to the mantel, to that faded photo of the couple in the field. "Your parents?" she asked, her voice softer than she meant it to be. Thomas nodded, his fingers tightening around his own mug. "Yeah, been gone a while now. This farm's all they left me." His words were clipped, but there was a tenderness in how he glanced at the photo, like it held a piece of his heart. Emma felt a tug in her chest, a memory of her mother's smile under that willow tree. She hadn't spoken of her in years, not to anyone, but something about this place, the creaking walls, the fire's warmth, the man who'd opened his door to a stranger, made her want to. "My mom used to take me to a park when I was a kid," Emma said, staring into her tea. "Just the two of us, every Sunday. She'd tell me stories about far-off places, said I'd see them all one day." Her voice caught and she swallowed hard. "She died when I was 12. Cancer. After that, it was just me and a string of foster homes." She hadn't planned to say it, hadn't meant to crack open that old wound, but the words spilled out, raw and unpolished, and she couldn't stop them. "I built everything I have to prove I wasn't that scared little girl anymore, but sometimes I still feel like her." Thomas listened, his face still but his eyes softening. He set his mug down and moved to the hearth, tossing another log onto the fire. The sparks flared, mirroring the quiet shift in the room. "Sounds like you've been carrying that a long time," he said, his voice low, steady. He didn't push, didn't pry, but the way he adjusted the blanket over her shoulders, careful, almost tender, felt like an answer. "My folks, they taught me to keep going no matter what, but some days this place feels too big for one person." He paused, rubbing the back of his neck. "Never thought I'd be alone out here." Emma looked at him, really looked, and saw the weight he carried too. Not the polished burdens of boardrooms, but the quiet ache of a life spent holding on to what was gone. She reached out, her fingers brushing his as she took the blanket, a fleeting touch that felt like a bridge. "You're not what I expected," she said, a small smile breaking through. "Most people would have left me out there." Thomas shrugged, but his eyes crinkled at the corners. "Couldn't let Rusty down. He's a better judge of character than me." They laughed, a soft sound that warmed the room more than the fire. Emma told him about her empire, how it glittered but left her empty, how tonight's missed meeting might cost her everything. Thomas shared stories of the farm, of winters so harsh he thought he'd lose it all, of the calf he'd stayed up all night to save. Each word peeled back their armor, revealing the shared thread of their loneliness. As the storm battered the windows, they sat closer, their voices weaving a fragile connection neither had expected. Emma felt something shift inside her, a warmth she hadn't known in years. Thomas, too, felt a spark, a sense that this night, this stranger, might mean more than he could yet understand. What would happen when the storm cleared? Would this fleeting bond survive the morning? Keep watching to see where their hearts lead them, and don't forget to subscribe and share this touching story with your friends. The storm had quieted to a whisper by dawn, leaving the world outside Thomas's farmhouse blanketed in soft, untouched snow. Inside, the fire had dwindled to embers, but the warmth between Emma and Thomas lingered, fragile and unspoken. They sat at the kitchen table, mugs empty, the air heavy with the weight of a night that had changed them both. Emma's phone, now charged, buzzed faintly on the counter. A tow truck was on its way. Her world, the one of deadlines and deals, was pulling her back. But as she looked at Thomas, his hands folded tightly, as if holding something precious, she felt a pang she couldn't name. "I should go," Emma said, her voice barely above a whisper. She stood, smoothing her borrowed sweater, her polished armor waiting by the door. Thomas nodded, his jaw tight, and rose to grab his coat. "I'll walk you out," he said. But his steps were slow, reluctant. Rusty trailed behind, sensing the shift, his tail low. Outside, the air was crisp, the sky a pale pink that promised a new day. Emma's Mercedes loomed in the distance, half buried but soon to be freed. She turned to Thomas, her breath catching at the sight of his face. Rugged, honest, etched with a quiet sorrow. "You didn't have to take me in," she said, her eyes searching his. "You could have left me out there, but you didn't." "Why?" Thomas looked away toward the fields his parents had loved, then back at her. "Because you looked like you needed more than a tow truck," he said softly. "And maybe I did too." His words hung between them, raw and unguarded, stripping away the last of their defenses. Emma's heart thudded, her carefully built walls crumbling. She stepped closer, her hand reaching for his, her fingers trembling as they intertwined. For a moment, they stood there, hands clasped, the world silent except for the soft crunch of snow underfoot. Emma's eyes glistened, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I've spent my life running toward something. Success, control, a legacy," she said, her voice breaking. "But last night, talking with you, I felt home, for the first time since I lost her." Thomas's grip tightened, his own eyes shining with unshed tears. "This place, it's all I've got," he said, "but it's never felt like enough. Not until you walked in." The distant rumble of the tow truck broke the spell, a reminder of the life waiting to reclaim her. Emma's chest ached. She could go back, seal her deal, keep climbing. But what would she lose? Thomas saw the conflict in her eyes and stepped back, letting her hand slip from his. "You've got a big life out there, Emma," he said, his voice steady but thick. "Don't let this old farm hold you back." But as he spoke, his fingers brushed a small wooden carving from his pocket, a tiny sparrow whittled with care, and pressed it into her palm. "Something to remember this by," he whispered. Emma stared at the sparrow, its delicate wings a mirror of her fragile heart. She wanted to stay, to see what this could be. But the tow truck's lights flashed closer, and her world demanded her return. She stepped toward him, her hands framing his face, and kissed him, a soft, desperate kiss that tasted of goodbye and possibility. "I'll come back," she promised, her voice fierce despite the tears. Thomas smiled, sad but hopeful, and nodded. "I'll be here." As she walked toward the truck, the sparrow clutched tight. Emma felt the weight of her choice. Would she return to this man, this place, or would her empire swallow her again? Don't miss the resolution of this heartfelt story. Subscribe and share to find out what happens next. The tow truck's rumble faded as Emma climbed inside, the wooden sparrow still clutched in her hand. Thomas stood by the farmhouse, a solitary figure against the snow-draped fields, watching her go. The kiss lingered on her lips, a promise she wasn't sure she could keep. As the city skyline loomed closer, her phone buzzed with missed calls. Investors, colleagues, a world demanding her return. But the sparrow in her pocket felt heavier than her empire. For weeks, Emma threw herself back into her life, sealing the deal she'd missed, her name blazing across headlines. Yet, in quiet moments, her fingers traced the sparrow's wings, and Thomas's voice echoed in her mind. She wasn't the same woman who'd left that farmhouse. Thomas, too, carried the weight of that night. He went back to his routines, feeding the chickens, mending fences, but the house felt emptier. Rusty would pause by the armchair where Emma had sat, as if waiting for her. Thomas didn't expect her to return. City lights rarely dimmed for a place like his, but he carved another sparrow, smaller this time, and set it on the mantel beside his parents' photo, a quiet hope he wouldn't name. He started small changes, planting wildflowers by the porch, fixing the creaky steps as if preparing for something or someone. 3 months later, a dusty rental car pulled up to the farm, its tires crunching on the gravel. Thomas looked up from the field, his heart skipping as Emma stepped out. Gone were the designer coat and heels. She wore a simple flannel shirt, her hair loose, a nervous smile on her face. In her hand was a worn notebook, pages filled with sketches and plans. "I couldn't stop thinking about you," she said, stepping closer, her voice steady but vulnerable. "Or this place. I want to build something here, not an empire, but a life." Thomas's eyes widened as she opened the notebook, revealing drawings of a community center, a place for locals to gather, learn, heal. She called it the Willow Path Center, named for the tree her mother loved, a dream to give others the sense of home she'd found that snowy night. "I sold part of my company," she admitted, her gaze meeting his. "I don't need all of it anymore. I need this, us." Thomas stood silent, then reached for her hand, his calloused fingers intertwining with hers. "You sure?" he asked, his voice thick. "This life's not easy." Emma laughed softly, squeezing his hand. "Nothing worth having is." They spent the day walking the farm, planning where the center could rise, near the old barn with a view of the valley. Emma's energy was infectious, her laughter mingling with Thomas's quiet humor. She spoke of her mother, of wanting to honor her by creating something lasting. Thomas shared stories of his parents' dreams for the land, how they'd always wanted it to be a place of community. Together they envisioned a future where the farm wasn't just his, but theirs, a haven for others built on their shared courage to choose what mattered. By dusk, they sat on the porch, Rusty at their feet, the new sparrow carving resting between them. Emma leaned against Thomas, her head on his shoulder, the city a distant memory. She'd traded boardrooms for this, a life rooted in love, not ambition. Thomas, no longer alone, felt the farm breathe again, alive with possibility. The Willow Path Center would be their legacy, a testament to a night that changed everything. As the stars emerged, Emma whispered, "I'm home." Thomas smiled, his heart full. Their story wasn't just a chance encounter, it was a transformation, a choice to build something real. This is the ending you've been waiting for. Subscribe and share this inspiring tale with your friends to spread the warmth. The sun dipped low over the valley, painting the Willow Path Center in golden light as Emma and Thomas stood hand in hand, watching children laugh in the wildflower-dotted fields. The farmhouse, once silent, now hummed with life. Neighbors sharing meals, stories, and dreams. That snowy night, when a stranded millionaire knocked on a farmer's door, wasn't just a moment. It was the start of a home, a love, a legacy. Sometimes a storm leads you to where you're meant to be. This is a story of kindness, courage, and second chances. Will it touch your heart too? Subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories for more tales that warm the soul, and share this journey with someone who needs hope today.